Alright, so my opponent said that she had a bill, but she never addressed it whatsoever throughout her negation. She simply just stated statistics from a website that didn't necessarily offer any sort of resolution to anything. Although she did address that, um, although she did not address a solution to the problem. She did state that there was one. She did acknowledge that there was a problem at about 3 minutes and 30 seconds to about 3 minutes and 33 seconds during her argument. She did acknowledge that there was a problem, yet she never offered an actual solution. And essentially, Heather's major claim was that the amount of influence that the federal government holds over the education system is not great. However, that is wrong. Because if the federal government didn't have that much influence, then how are they achieving the goal that she stated earlier of promoting student achievement for global education competitiveness? That doesn't really make any sense to me. According to ed.gov, which is the U.S. Department of Education's official website, in 1980, Congress established the Department of Education as a cabinet level agency. Today, the Department of Education operates programs that touch on every level and area of education. The department's elementary and secondary programs annually serve nearly 14,000 school districts and some 56 million students, roughly 99,000 public schools and 34,000 private schools. So when Heather was saying that the amount of influence that the federal government has is not that great, she was wrong. Because clearly, if they're touching on every area and level of education, they do have influence. Like maybe on paper it may not seem like the federal government has a lot of input because of the local and the local state government and the community through their fundraisers and donations that they receive in order to fund their schooling. But just because it doesn't look seen that way on paper, it doesn't mean that it's not true. The Constitution hasn't delegated education policy making to the federal government whatsoever. So they had to go and find other ways, essentially, to make sure that the policies and the structure that they would want to see carried out do get implemented within the school system. TruthinAmericanEducation.com explains that through the carrot and stick approach, the federal government holds out cash to the states as a lure for the states to abdicate their decision making and, most importantly, the will of their citizens. So basically, what's going on is the government is like a parent and the states are the children. Like the mom or dad tells their child, "Oh, I'll give you allowance if you do something like watch your baby brother or your baby sister this weekend." But the state, or I'm sorry, but the federal government is essentially saying, "I will provide funding to your education only if you implement specific policies that we also endorse." So they're just taunting them with saying like, here, you can have this money if you implement our policies, but you don't get it if you're not going to support them. And obviously schools need funding, so where else are they going to get it from? There's only so much money that can be raised in fundraisers and carnivals, and that can be donated by citizens within the community. Also, Truth in American Education stated that as a general measurement, the federal government provides about 10% of a state's education funds. So, by tying that money to policy, the federal government exerts enormous influence over a significant piece of the policymaking pie. So, maybe they own 10%. 10% actually can make a difference in amount of money that someone receives, because if you take away that 10%, then those education systems are going to be, those schools, they're going to be struggling after that. So that 10% can make a difference, but that 10% is just the funds that they're actually doing. After you get past 10% of the funds, imagine how much more policies they make them implement. It doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, we only provide 10%, so you only have to do 10% of our funds. It's not an exact correlation like that. It can be, okay, well, we gave you 10% of your income for this entire year, so possibly they would have to endorse like 5 to 10 new policies that would just change the entire education system. So the federal government does actually have um, more, the federal government does have more influence than Heather lets on, essentially. And another problem with Heather's negation was that she used the fallacy of focus. She only addressed the option of homeschooling that I provided. However, I did resolve that maintaining some modern school structures, homeschooling, and opening up education to the free market were additional ways to resolve the problem that is going on right now. But Heather didn't really acknowledge that whatsoever. She just essentially looked at the fact that I said homeschooling and she ran with that, and that was what a lot of her argument was based around. So I do stand by the notion that we do need to eradicate the federal U.S. government from our education system, because clearly the amount of influence that they have with their carrot and stick approach to the school and the to the local and state governments is just wrong. They have too much influence, and clearly there's a problem. Obviously, we wouldn't be sitting here having this debate if there wasn't a problem with America's education right now. So that's why the federal government should be eradicated.